Sections 10.2, Personal Loans and Simple Interest. The amount of credit extended or the principal of the loan and the interest rate that you may obtain depend on the assurance that you can give the lender that you'll be able to repay the loan. Security or collateral is anything of value pledged by the borrower that the lender may sell or keep if the borrower does not repay the loan. A personal note is a document or agreement that states the terms and conditions of the loan. Bankers sometimes grant loans without security, but they require the signature of one or more other persons called co-signers, who guarantee that the loan will be repaid. Interest is the money the borrower pays to use the lender's money. Simple interest is based on the entire amount of the loan for the total period of the loan. Here's the simple interest formula. Interest equals principal times rate times time, where P is the principal, the amount of money borrowed or loaned, R is the interest rate as a decimal, and then T is time, and generally it's in years. Ordinary interest is the most common type of simple interest. For computing ordinary interest, we use the banker's rule, which states each month has 30 days and a year has 12 months or 360 days. On the due date of a simple interest note, the borrower must repay the principal plus the interest. Sherry needs to borrow $6,200 to replace the roof on her home. From her credit union, she obtains a 30-month loan with an annual simple interest rate of 5.75%. Calculate the simple interest she's charged on the loan. So the principal is $6,200. The interest rate as a decimal is 0.0575. And the time, 30 months, we're going to convert this to years because the interest rate was given as an annual interest rate. So she's borrowing the money for 2.5 years. And there's our formula. We plug in principal, interest, and time, and we come up with an interest of $891.25. So the simple interest on the $6,200 at 5.75 for 30 months is $891.25. Determine the amount, principal plus interest, she must repay the credit union at the end of the 30 months to pay off her loan. So we're going to add the interest to the amount that was borrowed. And so she'll have to repay $7,091.25. Discount notes is another type of a loan. The interest is paid at the time the borrower receives the loan. The interest charged in advance is called the bank discount. Sigrid took a $500 loan using a 10% discount note for a period of 3 months. Determine the interest she must pay to the bank on the date she receives the loan, and then the net amount of money she receives from the bank, and then finally the actual interest rate for the loan. So the interest she must pay when she gets the loan, remember it was for 3 months at 10%, so she has to pay $12.50. So the net amount she'll receive when she takes out the loan, they're going to take that upfront interest, she'll get $487.50. So the interest she's actually paying is higher than 10% because she doesn't actually get the $500 for the whole period. She only gets $487.50. So we're going to solve our simple interest formula for the interest rate. I simplified on the right side. I multiplied $487.50 by 3 over 12, and then I'm going to divide both sides by 121.875, and I get an interest rate. And again, this rate is going to be a little bit more than the quoted rate, the interest rate of 10.26 or 10.3% rather than the quoted 10%. Jeffrey wants to take his mother out for dinner for her birthday, so he pawns his watch. The pawnbroker loans Jeffrey $75. 14 days later, Jeffrey gets his watch back by paying the pawnbroker $80.25. What annual simple interest did the pawnbroker charge Jeffrey? How much interest did Jeffrey pay? So he paid the difference between what he had to give to get the watch back and what the pawnbroker loaned him, and so that's $5.25 of interest. And remember, he only had that loan for 14 days. How much did he borrow? He borrowed $75. Now we want to figure out how long did he borrow the money for? 14 days. So we want to figure out the interest rate. So we have the principal of $75. The interest that he had to pay was $5.25. The time was 14 days over 360, and we're going to solve for the interest rate. So I simplified on the right-hand side. I multiplied 75 by 14 and divided by 360. And I'm going to divide both sides by the 2.9167, and I come up with a rate of 1.8. Now remember, this is the decimal, so you have to multiply by 100 to get the percent. So Jeffrey's actually paying 180% interest on this $75 loan. The United States rule says a payment that is less than the full amount owed and made prior to the due date is known as a partial payment. The Supreme Court decision specified the method by which these payments are credited, and it's called the United States rule. It states if a partial payment is made on the loan, interest is computed on the principal from the first day of the loan until the day of the partial payment. The partial payment is used to pay the interest first, and then the remaining payment is used to reduce the principal. The balance due on the date of maturity is found by computing the interest due since the last partial payment and adding this to the unpaid principal. For the banker's rule, we use this to calculate simple interest when applying the United States rule. And remember, the banker's rule considers a year to have 360 days, and any fractional part of a year is the exact number of days of the loan. So we use this table to figure out due dates for loans and the number of days that people borrow money. And it shows the months of the year and then the days of the month, and it tells us what day of the year that particular date is. So the type of problems we're going to work here is we're going to find out the number of days between two different dates, and it's going to be important to determine whether or not you're working with a leap year. This time it doesn't really matter because we're working with a date, both days after the end of February. But we want to know how many days from April 18th to November 11th. So you find April 18th on the table, and it's day 108. And then we find November 11th on the table, it's day 315, and we just subtract. So there's 207 days between those two dates. Now we want to find a due date of a loan. We're going to borrow on May 11th for 120 days. So we find May 11th on the table, it's day 131. We add 120. So the loan is going to be due on day 251. We locate that on the table, and it's September 8th. Miss Panic is a mathematics teacher, and she plans to attend a national conference. To pay for her airfare on November 1st, 2020, she takes out a 120-day loan for $400 at an interest rate of 12.5%. Determine the due date of the loan. November 1st, and it's 120 days. So we know it's going to be due in the following year. So we want to figure out the due date of the loan. So if we go to the table, November 1st is the 305th day of the year. And when we add 120 days to that, it goes into the next year. So we have to subtract 365. So 425 minus 365, it's going to be the 60th day into the new year. And if we look on that table 10.1, we'll see that it's March 1st, 2021.